right, well, good morning everyone. I'm Sabrina Landreth, the General Manager here in the Park District, and I really want to go ahead and welcome everybody to our media availability to highlight a very, very exciting project. But first I want to go ahead and start with a land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that we are within the ancestral territory of the Huichin and Halkeen peoples. The lands currently within the East Bay Regional Park District fall within the territories of a diverse and resilient group of indigenous people who are descended from Ohlone, Bay Miwok, and Delta Yokut ancestral tribes. Please join us in honoring with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it since time immemorial and continue to remain deeply connected to it today. Well, here we are. You wouldn't know by the weather that we see today with this lovely marine layer, but October is peak fire season here in the Bay Area, with Diablo winds creating potentially dangerous fire conditions. We're here today for a special wildfire media briefing and site tour to highlight a first of its kind, large-scale fuels reduction project in the Bay Area that is using a very innovative, climate-friendly carbonator to dispose of vegetation. The East Bay Regional Park District is leading the way in wildfire protection for the community, with innovative solutions that address wildfire risks and represent an eco-friendly model for the state and the nation. In the fall of 2020, while conducting our ongoing vegetation management work, the East Bay Regional Park District staff noticed significantly more dead and dying trees than they had seen in past years. Further investigation identified over 1,500 acres of tree mortality within our regional parks. We realized immediately that as a local wildfire prevention leader since the devastating East Bay Hills fire back in 1991, we needed to lead the way in mitigating the dangers caused by the tree die-off, which was also affecting other local agencies around the state and frankly the country. There was no time to sit back during this emergency, and we had to take action to mitigate the wildfire risk. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our fire chief in a moment to talk about this call to action and what we all did here in the Park District with all of our other partner agencies. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge some of those partners who have helped to fund this incredible, innovative project and pilot. And that includes our California State Senators Nancy Skinner, and then State Senator Wieckowski, Senator Padilla, Alex Padilla, the State Coastal Conservancy, and really want to highlight the support that we've gotten from the Governor's Office, including Secretary Wade Crowfoot, who is the Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California, and Chief Tyler, who is the Fire Chief for California Fire, Joe Tyler, who's also been very supportive of this project. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to our Fire Chief Eileen Tiley.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. I want to talk a little bit about how we did get here. So the Park District has been doing fuels management work for 60 to 70 years, and that took different forms. But for the last decade, it's really been seated in the fire department. The reason why the Park District has been doing fuels reduction work is because we sit in a unique position within our communities, which is the wildland-urban interface, or as you have come to know it as the WUI. So the Park District manages thousands and thousands of acres of fuel, different types, the large trees you see behind you, but also brush and grasslands, and they abut right up into neighborhoods and then down into our cities. So our responsibility in managing those fuels was realized very early on and many years ago by the Park District. The 1991 Oakland Tunnel Fire, as the fire department calls it, really was the first major fire that we'd had in recent times that got our attention. 23 people died, over 3,000 homes were lost, and it really put the Park District kind of on point as to the role that we could and should take with regards to fuels management. So we were already doing fuels management, but that very poignant and deadly incident is what really kind of focused our efforts. With that came our Wildfire Hazard Reduction Resource Management Plan, And a program was set into play where we started implementing across 3,000 acres on an annual basis, both initial entry, which is a first time that we would go in maybe and manage some of these large timber areas, and then the maintenance work. In other words, once you go in and you do this maintenance or you do this initial entry work and bring the area to make it a manageable project, you have to go in and maintain it. You can't just walk away. It grows back. So we decided in the implementation of our plan that we needed to grow our department, which we've done. The fire department has quadrupled in size. Our resources and our partnerships and our collaborators have grown in size. But the thing that really turned the page for us and why we're here today in Anthony Chabot is that case that General Manager Landreth was talking about, where we noticed that we had a lot of significant die-off. We realized that we had basically an emergency, a public safety emergency, because we had dead and dying trees, all due to climate change, that we need to deal with. So how do we take all the lands that we have with the 1,500 acres across very many of our parks that are experiencing this tree die-off and process all of that biomass? We had to start thinking outside of the box and thinking of new and innovative ways to be able to process that. So a lot of planning took place. There were some permits that the Park District needed to acquire that have never been attained for this area, both through CAL FIRE and through Bay Area Air Quality Management District, so that we could put into fruition our plan. And then there was the funding. So again, back to our collaborators that helped and supported us. We did use the California Coastal Conservancy's money, $1 million for this pilot project behind you that my Assistant Chief, Kari Haley, will talk about in a minute. And the Park District also added $1 million to the pilot project. And we had our successes, and Kari will talk a little bit about that in just a minute. The scale of the project is massive. It is the largest project of eucalyptus reduction in the area. And we hope that our successes and the things that we've learned will help embolden our community and really pave the way for other government agencies to follow in our footsteps, because it takes all of us doing it, not just the Park District. The tree die-off that we experienced here within the Park District goes way beyond the Park District, way beyond the region, and in fact throughout the state. So with that, to get down into a little bit more details about the project, I want to introduce my Assistant Chief, Kari Haley, who is in charge of our fuels management project.
Good morning. In April of 2023, we actually completed our Anthony Chabot pilot project. That project was significant because we were using an innovative technique that had never been utilized in this area before. Not only were there no permits for the type of equipment we were using, but we were the only agency that was going to be able to experiment with such a concept. Us being the largest regional park district in the United States, and also having the team that we have and being the largest fuels management project or department in the East Bay area, we felt it was our responsibility to take on that risk. Some of the risk was working with the regulatory's Air Quality Board to get the permitting completed so that we could utilize the carbonator to process the biomass, and also working with CAL FIRE, our partner, to establish the permitting so that the carbonator could be used in a safe way in a forested area. Once we were able to be successful with that, we completed 80 acres of a pilot project, $1 million funded by the California State Coastal Conservancy, and another $1 million funded by the East Bay Regional Park District General Fund. Not only were we able to impact the communities of Oakland and Castro Valley doing preventative fuels management work, but we also paved the way for a new concept. If we were to do our traditional methods of processing biomass, we would have sent all those logs all the way to Sacramento area, Woodland, where there's cogeneration facilities that process the biomass and turn it into energy. Instead, we were able to process the biomass on site. The small road that you traveled to get here, we would have had 7 semi trucks at all times on those roads. We're able to reduce the truck traffic by 10 times. We're able to reduce the CO2 that we would have produced. Typically would have been 19 pounds of CO2 produced from the trucking traffic. By processing on site, we're able to reduce it to 2.1 pounds of CO2. So not only are we doing a new efficient way that's better for the environment for processing biomass, but we took something that did not have much use, which was eucalyptus lumber, and we've turned it into something that has a benefit, which is biochar. So as of May of 2023, we began the Anthony Chabot 365-acre fuels management project. This project is significant because it's the largest eucalyptus project in Northern California and the largest in Park District history. We are directly impacting the communities of Oakland and Castro Valley with this project. The area here, before we started managing the trees, there was 200 to 2,000 stems per acre. An acre is roughly the size of a football field. 2,000 stems it's so crowded that you wouldn't be able to walk through that forested area. If we were to have a catastrophic wildfire like we had in 1991 during the Oakland Hills fire, that would have catastrophic outcomes for their local community. So this work is directly impacting the lives of Oakland and Castro Valley, and we are creating future benefits by proving a concept that has impacts on our environment in a positive way. We've proven a concept. We're able to take eucalyptus trees that had very little commercial use and now have an outcome of creating biochar that has a beneficial use, not just for the Park District, but for our greater community. Our pilot project, the biochar that was produced, was sent to local farms. So we're able to prove that those local farms were able to make use of that biochar, and we have a demand for biochar in our outside community. We now are establishing that we have a use of biochar within the Park District. So far, we are 25% completed with this project, and the biochar that we've produced, 100% of it has already been distributed within the Park District properties. Majority of that biochar has gone to one of our historic farms, Ardenwood, where it's being utilized for crop yields to help the farming that they're doing in Ardenwood Historic Farms. And another project where the biochar is being used is in one of our parks in Wildcat Canyon, where we had a landslide occur from the atmospheric rivers that took place earlier last winter. That biochar is being mixed with the soil so that we can mediate that area, and with the intent that the biochar will help the plants grow back quicker than if we did not use biochar. We also have a biochar utilization committee. That committee is tasked with experts throughout the Park District who are working to find additional uses of biochar within the Park District, and also will be working to study how biochar can be used and perfect prescriptions so that the work that we do today will benefit others 10 years from now. That's ready for any questions.
Are you selling the biochar?
It's a great question. We are not selling the biochar. The biochar that was produced from our pilot project went to local farms, and one of those farms was working with CAL FIRE, the State Department, and they were funded to find different uses of biochar to help establish that industry. The biochar right now that we have has all been distributed, and we currently have a wait list within the Park District for additional biochar.
But it's being distributed for free.
Correct.
I think biochar might be a new term for some people. Can you explain what it is and why it has these magical properties that it can help grow stuff and also repair landslides and stuff?
Yeah, so the carbonator, which is the piece of equipment behind us, we place logs, which are biomass, into the carbonator. It uses pyrolysis to burn the biomass at a high temperature of 1500 degrees. Simply, the product that it produces is captured carbon in the form of biochar. Biochar has beneficial uses, one of the most beneficial uses is it has the ability to retain water. So you can use biochar within soil and mix it with drought-stressed soil, and it has potential benefits for drought-stressed environments. It can be used for grass, turf areas, for lawn, for, like I said earlier, for washouts, for landslide areas, and it's currently being used for crop yields out at our Ardenwood Historic Farms.
Mostly as a water saturation device, or does it contain nitrogen and phosphorus as well? Or?
It can be used to absorb what your goal is to absorb. So in this case, our goal is to absorb water, but here, for example, at Anthony Chabot, we have lead on the site here. So biochar could be used to absorb the lead. It can be used to absorb any substance that you desire to absorb.
So the farmers would use it to absorb the inputs and keep them at a certain level in their crops, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so our farmers that we have at Ardenwood Historic Farms are, these farmers have been using, well, they've known about biochar for many years, and when they were in college, that was something that they had known about, and so they're very excited when they had the opportunity to make use of biochar. And for them, there's a lot that goes into it, but you'll need to test the soil. Our biochar has been tested with the pH, acidity levels, and based off that, you can create a prescription so that you can have a beneficial use for the biochar.
Can you talk about weighing the carbon emissions from shipping the eucalyptus logs to Sacramento versus burning it right here?
Yeah.
Processing it right here?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll introduce once again Javon Law. So just so I can, so that you know, I'm the assistant fire chief, but Javon Law is actually the project manager. So she is the one that is the expert on the scene handling this project. So I'll go ahead and have her answer that question.
Hello everyone. So yeah, to answer your question, I think what I understood you to be asking was how the differences between the emissions and PM 2.5 pollutants from our more traditional hauling methods for biomass from projects of this nature compared to this innovative process with the carbonator. The calculation is pretty complex. There's a lot of math that goes into it, life cycle analysis of both processes, but the key difference is that this process is processing the material that you see behind us, that those logs and other biomass that we can't leave in our treatment units for permitting and environmental reasons, habitat improvement reasons. We can't leave all the biomass in there, so we have to process it. To process it here on site and reduce it down in the way that the carbonator does, reducing this biomass down to less than 10% of its original mass, and then be able to utilize it more regionally, especially if we could utilize some of it, on the project site where the trees were originally coming from, has immense benefits for emissions reduction as well as PM 2.5 reduction. The PM 2.5 reduction, that's the pollutants that make smog, are really where you see a lot of those benefits because you don't have as many trucks on the road and you don't have as many trucks moving this material from the area where it came from in the treatment units to an area where it can be processed, such as a cogeneration facility. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great.
What's the difference between doing this and chipping it?
Well, chipping it, even after you chip it, you still have to do something with all the chip. So if you were to chip it, you could put it in the back of a chip truck and then take that chip truck down the road, but still producing a lot of emissions. You could also take the chip and leave all the chip on site. There are many agencies around us who do that. There's a lot of benefits to that process. It's not the right solution for us generally, for fuels reduction reasons, as well as for habitat improvement reasons. And we also are by our permitting and regulation, restricted in how much chip we can leave within areas where we've done fuels management treatment.
Just to clarify, you can't leave it here because it's eucalyptus and you'd rather have live native trees. Is that Am I understanding that correctly?
In regards to the initial reasoning for the fuels reduction?
Yeah. Or I guess yeah.
Okay.
One of the things I wanted to make sure we did is, and you brought up a great question, you're talking about different tools, really, and what the Park District has done so well is use all of the tools in the toolbox. The reason we've been able to do that is because we have some experts on our staff that understand what all those tools are, and so when we look at every single project that we have, that's the first thing that we need to figure out is what's the problem and what tools do we have. So the other two experts that I wanted to introduce to you is Captain Patrick McIntyre. He was kind of the brainchild for this, and he stays quiet and sits over here quietly, but he is the one that kind of took all the pieces and kind of connected them. And then we also have Pablo Shapiro. Is that right? Shapiro.
I have another carbon question before you leave the topic.
Right, and so I was going to hand you over to Patrick or Javon, whichever it was an opportunity for me to jump in and say, we have other people here too that can talk about some of this stuff. So, because I'm proud of them, frankly. And so, Patrick McIntyre.
At 1500 degrees, does it make smoke?
So regarding the carbonator and how it performs, and when it's at its peak operation period, about 15 to 1600 degrees, it really does not generate very much smoke. Given the science that's been put into this piece of equipment and the technology, it really functions as somewhat of air curtain burner in a way. So there's a large diesel motor that's actually running at the time that this is in operation that forces air down and into the combustion, the material that's burning in the actual, in the tub, as well as puts a curtain over the top. And it really does burn so efficiently that it's not really putting up too much smoke. As far as the specific amounts, the data's there as far as, Tiger Cat, the corporation that creates it, but really when it's operating at full peak capacity, you can really just almost see heat waves coming
like
up
a
off
kiln.
of it. Exactly, yeah, it's very efficient pyrolysis.
I think my question is less about cool tools. I'm sold on that. More about how you're defining the problem. You mentioned permits requiring you to move the eucalyptus off-site, and you don't want to put chips down because they can burn, they can spread wildfire too. So my question is, do you have to move it off-site because it's eucalyptus, or are you defining the problem as wildfire risk or as non-native eucalyptus? I know that's touchy, but I really think people are interested.
I definitely do understand your question. I'll do my best to help clarify and answer. So we do have approximately 2,500 acres, say, of eucalyptus in Anthony Chabot in the parklands. So that is a species that was planted for specific reasons when it was planted by our forefathers of sort. So we have been working with and managing eucalyptus forests for a long time, and by no means is it possible to really, eradicate eucalyptus from our environment and our fuels treatment areas. There are some locations that is possible, and we do that, but to be cost effective and really meet the goals as set forward by our fuels management plan and get the most benefit using taxpayer dollars wisely, we really do thinning treatments. And independent on what the species are, at times we still do thin the forest. So we have to really look at it from the perspective of what will happen when a fire does move through the landscape. So we work our prescriptions based on that, and therefore, when we treat an area, we do need to process and get the material out of there, because really we do need to decrease the fuel loading in an area. So this is one of the means. Other projects we do completely different. This is really just a scale and scope so large that this is really what was found to be the most effective manner, cost effective as well.
All right, one more question.
What trees died in 2021? When you found a bunch of when you had the big tree die off in 2021 that ignited your imaginations to do this? What species was that?
So I don't know if you recall sudden oak death syndrome, or if you're familiar with SOD, sudden oak death syndrome. So when it was noticed in the state of California that there was a pathogen working against our oak trees, task force was created to help identify where and how and what was happening and what the long-term effects were to be of that. This was kind of almost similar in when it was first noticed that it was eucalyptus, blackwood acacia, and some of the other natives that we were starting to see some effects on were California bay trees, like bay laurel trees, but primarily it was in the eucalyptus, acacia, as well as pine species too. So
And
oak, that's sudden oak death syndrome. That's been happening for a lot longer.
Oh, is that in the 2021 mix?
That's not the primary species that we're really looking at,
Okay.
but is kind of mixed in with it. So
Okay.
kind of roundabout it on that. Sorry.
I think that's what sudden oak death is. I think that's what got everybody in the habit of looking for things. That incident, and that happening of seeing our oaks die off, and the task force and the education that came behind that. That really, oops, sorry. That really, usually I don't need a mic, sorry. That really got the park district and the fire department's attention. So you pay attention to things like that when your job is to manage fuels.
Yeah.
Little nuances like certain trees dying off in a certain area, or is this happening just here? Is it happening other places? So and that's kind of what Patrick brought to us was we're starting to see this die off, and then we started checking around with other agencies, whether it be academic agencies or other government agencies. That's two hard words to put together. And so it was kind of this awakening of, oh, we've got something going on.
And that's what you attributed to climate change. So
Yeah,
you
there was a lot of
determined
different pathogens that were suspected, I guess you could say, and whether it be a pathogen or an insect, but really there's no silver bullet. It was just that, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, the Forest Service kind of all came back with, it's not one thing, it's kind of this overarching climate change and the effects of drought.
In one thing of note, through these partnerships, and the Sudden Oak Death Task Force goes a ways back, and through those same partnerships, we've been working with UC Berkeley, Garboletto Labs, that have actually created a tree mortality and dieback task force that is actively working on coming to some solutions. And as it stood, we really were not in so much of a position just to really wait and see what happened, but we realized that the situation was upon us, and there was not really any time just to wait. It was really time to take action and do what we could, at least to make sure that we're preventing the possibility from what was going on to create the catastrophic fire that could potentially take place.
Sabrina, if you can have some closing remarks really about the sense of urgency and innovation in the team effort.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. And these obviously, we've got just a few of our in-house experts here, but I just really want to emphasize, as the largest park district in the country here and the largest landowner in the East Bay, the sense of responsibility that we felt when we, as our staff noted here, saw the increased tree die-off and tree mortality, but the fact that we are a park district who's been doing this work already on the ground for decades, and knowing that we really needed to set the example for the rest of the region, if not the state. It took that responsibility very seriously. As the captain noted, we did not wait for the science to tell us why, but really came together in an emergency operations mindset to deal with the emergency that was at hand here. We have our in-house scientists that have been with us along the way, and all of the park district staff. We have 1,000 employees here in the park district, and this has really been an all hands on deck with our board of directors who've been very supportive, and as I mentioned before, with the support of the state of California through both funding and lending their expertise. So this, as the chief noted, is just one tool that we have in our toolbox. We have our own fuels crew, our own suppression crew, our helicopter, 2 helicopters that help us here in the Park District, and our own fire department alongside our biologists. And really want to thank all of our staff for treating this with a sense of urgency. And we see this really as kind of the beginning of our efforts to continue to be yet another leader in a very innovative technology here, and adding this to the toolbox for not just the region here in the East Bay, but for all of the state of California and for the nation. We even received a call, I believe, from Canada when they were facing their wildfires earlier this year to come to the Park District and learn from us. So feeling that sense of responsibility and answering that call to action. So I want to commend the staff here for everything that they're doing on the ground, being innovative, being willing to take risks, and to tell our story here. So thank you all for coming.
One question for you. If you didn't do this, what do you think the result would be?
I'll turn to the chief.
That's my worst nightmare. We have a lot of fuel to manage under really bad conditions, climate-wise. When my general manager was speaking about, I got a call from a chief that's up in Canada. The global experts they're trying to catch up, right? They're trying to take all the data they have and make the best projections they can with the information that they have on hand. While we're experiencing it, right? The 9 atmospheric rivers that we had. The chief said to me, we weren't expected to get the kind of conditions that you all have in California, because everybody knows California burns, it's part of our ecosystem really, up here for another 10 years, and yet we're seeing it all of a sudden. What do we do? So there was no other action to take when we saw this but to come up with a project like this or an idea like this. We had to find a solution. So we took the best information that we had at the time. We looked at the science. We checked with our collaborators. Nobody had done it, not at least here in the Bay Area, or in Northern California. And so we just started putting one foot in the other, one foot in front of the other, and being quick, realizing it was potentially an emergency, right? A safety emergency, but also being very thoughtful in that process because we are leading the way. And so whatever successes and failures we may have are going to affect people that come, other agencies that come along and try to do the very same thing we do. So there really was no other choice. I can't think about what it would be like if we couldn't have dealt with this. It would have been, we would have been dealing with it in the ways that we have traditionally done it. And that's not the most cost-effective way. It's not the most environmentally friendly way. It's certainly not the most efficient or effective way. And it doesn't forge into new territory, which is really something the Park District's been very good at doing.
Okay, we're kind of done, right? Yes. So the next step is going to be the site tour, and so this part's done, but Javon here will talk about.
Are you gonna fire that thing up for us?
No, we cannot.
Unfortunately, we cannot because we're still in wildfire season, as was discussed at the start of this. So the risk
Rain.
associated with that sort of operation waits until wildfire season is done.
Hopefully next week. We look forward to showcasing it in action when we're able to in a few weeks.
When is wildfire officially? Do you have a date or that it's officially?
We do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
So
What signifies the end
Great
of it
question.
to
the
you?
greening up of fuels. So as fuels, grass starts to green up, that is the change of winter coming. And that is typically what ends wildfire because grass doesn't burn as quickly once fuels start greening up.
Can I ask you one thing just before we break? I mean, I don't know if you're going to address this one-on-one, but the idea that we had years of drought, which posed a huge wildfire threat, and then we had a really wet year, which then also grows more some of the lighter fuels up. where would you say, I mean, there's no way to totally predict it, but where would you say we are? How did the season shake out for us? Because it feels like we had a pretty mild fire season this year. We haven't had huge mega fires that we've been looking at before. Was that helpful because of the drought, or because of the wet winter, or does the wet winter provoke, create more fuels that cause further danger? There's always that question about is it more dangerous when it's dry or after it's been wet? How would you define kind of where we are right now after what we've seen?
It depends. So one of the most significant components of having fires is the ignition. So you can have seasons where the fuel is high because of a rainy season, but if you don't have ignition, you could have a slow or fast fire season. You can have years where the fuel is low but extremely dry, but if you don't have the ignition, you could have a slow or if you do have the ignition, fast fire season. So the ignition is literally the main component of how bad of a fire season you're going to have. So fortunately, we're okay, but fire season isn't over yet.